Okay, good morning. Good morning. It's my very first time on a StreamYard Live. So we are tuning in on Facebook. And I'm here today with Adaire, and I can't wait to introduce you. So Spill the Tea normally is on live on Instagram every Tuesday. So over the next 9 weeks, we will have a live every single Tuesday at 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. But now we will be streaming it off of Facebook instead of IG. So now for today, it's been 2 weeks and I've been off. So I'm like, trying to get used to all the things. But today I have with me Adaire Smithwick, a community builder, storyteller based in Westminster, Colorado. I really have to work hard on saying Westminster too.
I know.
I always want to say minister.
I say minister. People are like, you're not from here, are you?
Human beings were made for connection and stories, and that's exactly what it allows us to do. Adaire's biggest mission in life is to bring more people together, help them recognize the power that we create as individuals amongst the collective. And she is also certified in hypnotherapy, which I can't wait to discuss today. But Adaire, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be talking to you. I know that this is going to be a really great conversation. So ready for it. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for saying yes. And like I said, and also we cannot see comments and all of the things. So if by chance you're watching the replay or you're watching live, just comment, let us know, ask us any questions, and we'll be sure to circle back around to answer them later. Okay, so Adaire, what's going on in your world?
That is a great question, and also a big question. I asked one of my friends that the other day, and she was like, what a big question. Let's see. So recently, I actually sunset my business, the 11th house, to go full-time back into 9-to-5 world as a community manager for a creator-centric startup. So basically, the company that I work for helps creators develop more of a business opportunity outside of like the platforms that they're on, like YouTube or TikTok, knowing that like those platforms previously haven't really prioritized the creator, aka like monetized and actually paid them. They're making big bucks off of creators, but creators aren't making big bucks off of them. So our company helps them be able to then go and like create sustainable business options through memberships, which is really fun. So I've really loved doing that. Sunsetting my business was definitely really hard. And I definitely am still like, gaining my footing and figuring out where certain things kind of stand. I've definitely had a big period of self-discovery. Other than that, I'm trying to think like those are kind of the major things happening in my world. I've gone on a few retreats. I've been really making an effort to travel more. Which is
I love that.
I leave to go to Boston for a wedding tomorrow, taking the red eye out. So that's what's going on this week.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, first and foremost, you already just dropped so much. Okay, so you're sunsetting your business. P.S. Love that word, sunsetting.
Yes.
Okay, so what was your previous business prior to this new adventure you're on?
So my previous business was a small marketing studio. I had initially wanted to really help different business owners create communities for themselves outside of just building an audience online, which I can go more into. But over the last year, it kind of just evolved into social media marketing, email marketing, copywriting. And I love all of those things, but I realized that it was really kind of keeping me boxed in. And I had on my heart that I really wanted to go forth into more of like community focused projects and things of that nature. And I just wasn't able to do that. And of course, I mean, as small business owners, right? Like I get it, you get it, like every dollar counts. And a lot of the time, I think some small business owners don't understand the difference between like an audience, but then a community and how they can like monetize and how they can sustain it too. That's another big thing is when you create a community, for example, like if you're using Circle or a Facebook group, you have to maintain it. And that takes a lot of work. And oftentimes as small business owners, there's so much on everyone's plate. So I think my role kind of evolved as well, as not, and partly because I just am so passionate about what I do, but I wasn't able to fully just say like, okay, I'll help you with social, I'll help you with email, I'll help you with copywriting. It really like turned into like, I want to help you grow your business, but there's only so much that I could give for that. And so after experiencing some health issues over the last really like 3 years since the end of 2020, I decided to prioritize my nervous system, prioritize my health, and start kind of moving in a different direction, and had a really great opportunity kind of fall into my lap that I was like, I just know that this is the universe ushering me into this new phase of life in the best way possible. So yeah, that was what I was doing. And that's kind of what like led to ultimately this decision. I had really, really great clients, which I'm so grateful that I can like still be friends with and catch up with. But I definitely am loving what I'm doing now and getting to really be so hands-on on one thing, being able to go in on one thing, especially a community that I'm really passionate about.
Yes, I love that. So, I mean, and I think the key thing here also that stands out to me, just as an entrepreneur and also someone that services clients, sometimes it's really hard to like, we feel like when we are pivoting and growing into a new phase of our lives, we don't want to let our clients down. We don't want to
Yes.
disappoint people, right? Oh, so I'm sure that that was like, it was bittersweet. And I'm sure so many let you go with kindness and love and, wishing you the best. But I'm sure that was one of the hardest things. And I know that it was more of a recent shift for you. What was the emotions leading up to that shift? Were you nervous? Were you afraid? Tell me what you were feeling.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a really, really rocky end to 2022. I feel like 2022 was like the year from hell, according to everybody that I talked to. 2023, I feel like everyone was like, oh, I'm good now. Like everything I left in the past. At least that's how I felt. But I had a rocky end to 2022 with my mental health, excuse me, with my physical health. I had really overcommitted myself in some ways. In a way that I previously could have, but my health was really preventing me from being able to do that, which is so interesting how the body literally tells you like, no, you can't do that. So that was probably the first time that I kind of started to accept that this might not be something that I'm going to pursue long-term. And that was really hard to grapple with. I think it took me a long time to really admit that to myself. I started kind of experiencing this rocky end to the year in like October. And then it wasn't until January that I was like, yeah, I think it's time for me to like really accept that this is not the direction that I want to go in. And it was really difficult. I mean, it was really difficult because, like you said, having to shed this old part of me, right? Like I looked back at myself in like 2019 or 2020, and all I wanted to be was an entrepreneur. And I felt like I was losing part of my identity by choosing to sunset my business. And that was really hard because I was like, this is who I am. This is what I worked so hard for. I had like given up other opportunities to go and do this. And now I don't want to do this anymore. And I actually had a few really great conversations with some of my close friends, one of who is a Reiki practitioner. And she was like, what would it be like for you to like stop compartmentalizing everything and like bring it all to the center of yourself rather than like looking at yourself? I know, it's so good. She's so amazing. Like rather than looking at yourself as like, oh, the entrepreneur here and like the sister there, and maybe you're the friend here or the speaker here. What would it be like to bring all of those pieces to the center and like ground yourself in that? And no matter what happens in life, know that like there's still a piece of you that's entrepreneurial. There's still a piece of you that's a sister. There's still a piece of you who maybe wants to go and like work for a company, whatever that looks like. And that really helped me a lot. I think at the same time, I kept saying as cliche as it is, bittersweet, because at the same time I was going through this interview process with this company that I really truly fell in love with. I would say like, this is my dream job. This is exactly what I want to be doing. And I know that I'm meant to be doing in the moment. And that was hard because I was like, here I am, like anxious because I'm like, how are my clients going to perceive me? Right. I'm like projecting my own fears onto them. And of course, everyone handled it so well and we're so kind. And I'm also worried because I'm like, oh my gosh, we have these contracts and like, I don't want to let them down and I don't want to screw them over. And I want them to be able to go and like take what we've done over the last X amount of months or years and like run with it. And sometimes that is the case and sometimes that's not the case. But then I'm like really excited for this new position and moving into this new position. So it was really a roller coaster of emotions. I think for me, I've come to terms with, I try to call myself more of a nurturer, but definitely like a recovering people pleaser. And my therapist was like, you could call yourself a nurturer. And I was like, yeah, that's great. People pleasing. Yeah. So to me, I just naturally am a nurturer. I'm a giver. And sometimes that can go like way into the people pleasing where then it's like, I want everyone to love me. And I was like,
Right.
inevitably, this is going to be hard for some people. And this is good. It's hard for me. So a lot of emotions there, a lot of like confronting the fear, I think, too, that I had felt, right? It's like looking like literally people pleaser's worst nightmare is to have to be like, hey, I'm so sorry. Here's what's going on. Right. And having to like face the consequences of that. So
it's that uncomfortable conversation, right? Because you
yes.
don't know what to expect and you don't want to let people down. And at the same time, it's creating boundaries, and creating boundaries can be so challenging.
So challenging. Probably the hardest thing anyone can do. I feel like I have had a really difficult time. It's more so challenging. I'll be careful, mindful of my words, but boundaries are hard. Boundaries can be challenging.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. And that's business and personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because boundaries look different for everyone. So also having, what's the word? Understanding for other people's boundaries has,
Yeah.
like, since I started just learning more about boundaries and people's boundaries as my own, I think that's it's a challenging thing, because even when you need to say no for your own mental health and well-being, uh, it's like you're saying no to someone else, and so it's almost like sometimes we feel like we're taking something away from them, right?
Yes.
And that's really hard. It's a hard topic.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people, what I really have found and what I really had to really accept myself was, okay, well, I want to have boundaries, but then when someone draws a boundary with me, like I have to respect that, and I don't think a lot of people know. I think there's thankfully a big movement for people to really start to implement more boundaries. And I feel like boundaries kind of like a hot topic right now, but then it still doesn't eliminate like the sting that you feel when someone's like, hey, nope, can't do that. Or like, hey, I don't like when you do this, or when they set that boundary with you. But it's a two-way street. It's you can set your boundary, but you owe it to the other person to respect their boundary too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just trying to be understanding of the emotions attached, and being, I find that for me, it was like, okay, I can create a really good boundary, but I'm not as aware of other people's emotions when I set those boundaries.
Yeah.
So creating space to have that conversation, and I mean, it can be really uncomfortable, or it can just be like, okay, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's have this conversation and let's unpack it. This is actually what's going on, or this is what I need. But I think that there's even a boundary with that, in the sense of, like, we shouldn't always feel like we have to justify ourselves or prove ourselves or explain ourselves. Right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes no is a complete sentence, and people are like, oh my gosh, that's such a harsh thing to say. And I'm like, is it?
It's not, but society tells us that we should be so willing to give all of ourselves, or we should be this, or that's what kindness is. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned, so I know I've mentioned my therapist once already, but I've worked with a somatic therapist over the last year and a half, and she has truly changed my life. Before that, I had seen probably 7 therapists. Like,
wait, what is a somatic therapist? For those that don't know, we gotta reel it in.
We'll dive into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she basically is a therapist, talk therapist, but she works really with the body. So in a typical session, and like I said, I had seen many therapists before. So a typical session with like a past therapist would have maybe looked like, and how did that make you feel? Not to be all stereotypical, but like, okay, great. Like it made me feel sad. She's like, where do you feel that in your body? What does the anger want to do right now? What does the anger want to say right now? And so then you're really hyper tuning into where that is in your body, because our body does store emotion and trauma. And that was something that I had previously never really done. I live a lot up here in my head. And so talk therapy for me with those other therapists, hence why I had like 7 of them before this one, just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so when I learned a little bit more about somatics, the practice of like dropping into the body, I was like, yep. So that's what she does. And that's how she's supported me, is really getting me out of my head and into my body and helping like to move that energy in my body. And she always says, well, that's nice, but you can be kind and still say no, or you can be kind and still hold your boundary, or you can be kind and still sternly tell someone that you didn't appreciate that they did that. And she's also taught me this concept of like separating personhood from behavior, because sometimes what we do is not actually a direct reflection of who we are at our core. And understanding that and being able to separate that, I think, allows us to give ourselves more grace, but also allows us to give other people more grace and compassion. And so I always try to, when I'm having to like set a boundary or have a hard conversation, understand like I can still be kind and I can also still be assertive and stand up for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so good. I mean, there's so many things I'm like reeling through my head of different scenarios that I've been in, where it's also like I've tried to be kind, but then because the other person, and I think the personhood versus behavior is just like that. I feel like that needs an asterisk next to it, because people react to you from a behavior standpoint, not actually from who they are. You know, it's like a reactive emotion sometimes. And they don't always understand that, but it's also kind of exhausting sometimes for us to have to explain like, hey, that was out of line and uncalled for.
Right. Yes.
So finding the happy medium, but also allowing, like, it's almost like your emotions are your emotions and I can't take them on as my own.
100%.
You know? And so I think that's another key thing. And gosh, that's brilliant, really. Personhood versus behavior. Wow, because it really does allow you to even separate it compartmentalizes in a way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well, I don't need to hold on to this emotion. I don't need to feel guilty or shame or bad or whatever the feeling is that you might feel because you created a boundary for yourself, right? It's like, these are not my emotions. This was my intention. And these were your emotions from your reaction, which I'm sure once it comes full circle, you'll calm down and you'll get over it.
Right. Exactly. And also, and if they don't, it's not your freaking responsibility, right? That's like the biggest lesson of all time. I'm like, and even if they don't, even if they stay mad at me forever, it's not my fucking fault.
I love it. It's true. It's so true. It's so true. Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay. So also with all of this experience that you've been on, like, okay, you're going to a somatic therapist. I know you've done a lot of healing. You've done a lot of work just because you've gone through your own transformation. And I mean, I don't know, maybe it wasn't burnout per se. It's just that you were being called to do, what would you say? Do more for like, it is the collective, right? Like, it's like, you didn't want to just be in this one space. You kind of wanted to branch out, right? That's kind of why you took on this new position.
Yeah, I think I realized like burnout, of course, burnout now in like a medical sense is like when you are just so overwhelmed or like you're so stretched thin. And I definitely feel like there were aspects of that I had brought onto myself. But really my burnout was stemming from like doing things that just didn't light me up as much. And I thought they would, or maybe they did. And I was just like, I need to go and learn. I had this really big desire to go and learn, which I think that you can do sometimes from a team rather than being like, it's me and I'm making all the decisions and I have like 13 clients and like, I mean, in a way it is like, you're trying to please, you're trying to make sure like 13 people are okay and 13 people's businesses are running okay, while also trying to make sure your business is running okay. And I was like, I don't know if that's really what I want to do, if that's what I feel lit up about. And that's, I think, what was making me kind of feel and move into like, I think it was my body that was like, hey, red flag, let's go and do something that like truly lights you up. And like just community does that for me. Any conversation about community, any kind of community focused project, I think communities are so important to the world. I mean, as human beings, I don't know if you've read the book Ikigai, but I refer to it a lot. It's a really great book about how they really did some studies in like blue zones where people live the longest. And they were like, what makes these people live so long? Like what makes them reach 100 plus? And Ikigai is a Japanese concept. And what they found was, of course, diet, exercise, being like mindful, having a purpose in life, but like being surrounded by people who have your back. And that is like the community. And so a lot of the times in these blue zones, you'll see people who have gardens. And if they have a bad harvest, the community's there to like give them food to like feed their families and things like that. And it's everyone has each other's back mentality, which I think in the world of social media and the world post-COVID, where we had to live inside all day, every day for like a year and a half, we are seriously lacking that. And so to me, if I can go and like help make a difference, granted, I'm like in this company right now, but like that is really my world or my life's purpose, my world's mission. So, and I, like I said, I think that was like in and of itself helped solve the burnout, right? Of like, great, I'm like back into like full alignment with what I'm doing.
I love it. Well, so what was that transition like from having more of like the entrepreneurial schedule of working when you want to like the traditional 9 to 5? Is it even a traditional 9 to 5?
So thankfully, it's not traditional 9 to 5. We have team members all over the world, which is great because it means that like everyone can kind of make their own schedule in a way. They're very big on autonomy and really like just like getting what you need to get done. The funny thing is that I feel like I was working a lot more just because it was like the first thing I thought of in the morning, the first thing I thought of before I went to sleep. It just constantly consumed me when I was my own boss, because I was constantly thinking about how to like grow or how to scale or how I was going to pay the bills or how I was going to like help this person or how I was going to, help my VA or pay my VA, things like that. Whereas now it's like, I'm still thinking about it, but in a way because I love it, not because I feel like I have to. And I get to, I'm very routine based. So I'm like 8 to 5, whatever, does that mean I like don't get up to take a walk in the day? No, of course I'll go like grab lunch or I'll go take a walk.
Take a mini break for spill the tea.
Right, exactly. I never did that actually when I was working for myself. I always felt like I had to be working. And there was no boundary. And that was something that I really struggled with. And at the end of the day was something too that I just couldn't do. And I felt like I needed to go back into a place where I could be more boundaried. And thankfully, where I work now is like, everyone's like, are you taking time off? Are you taking breaks? And I'm like, I need that. Like, I need someone to be like, you don't need to be on all the time. Because if not, I will be. And that's something that I'm trying to work on. But so the adjustment definitely was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I think because it's still a startup too, there's that like entrepreneurial ownership kind of side of things, which I really love because it means like I get to literally kind of run free with my ideas and of course like get buy-in and, have the team to support and collaborate with. But I'm not so like, here are your tasks for the day, do them, right? It's like, I still have that freedom. but just in a different kind of container, so to speak.
Yes. I love that. Kate said she's working on that as well, giving herself time to take a break or permission to take a break.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is, right? Because like in the entrepreneurial world, it's like our to-do list never ends. So it's like we
Yes.
keep going, 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 going. And if you don't carve out time, I'm actually in the process of trying to do that as well, just incorporating my non-negotiables throughout the day. It's like super easy to talk about. We all know that we need to have the non-negotiables in our day, but then do we follow through and do them? And, you know, it's like, oh, like my client needs this. Like, do you stop everything and start doing it for them? Or like, okay, well, I will be able to work on that for you by this date or something like that, which can sometimes be very, it's like our nature. It's
Yeah.
get things done.
Of
right?
course. Well, and also like, how do you not work on what you love to, like, you obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, like you love your business, you love what you do, you love yourself because you're putting a lot of trust in yourself. So it's hard to not to like be like, I'm going to take a break from this. You know, it's like, it's really easy to let it consume you in other sense. I also, the one thing that came to mind as you were sharing that about like, sometimes it's hard to have to say like, hey, I'll get that done like then, or in like 2 days or whatever. I put a turnaround boundary in like my onboarding where I was like, 48 to 72 hours for a last minute ask. And that's like the absolute minimum. Because like, I'm just not doing like one-off stuff anymore. But I feel like entrepreneurship sometimes is really like a series of having uncomfortable conversations, you know, and like getting used to it.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. Okay, so then as this all unfolds, I know you're working on a personal brand yourself, and your personal brand is also something that your new business is encouraging for you to create. So tell me, what's your personal brand? Tell me about that. Like, what does that even mean for those that don't know? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Candidly, I'm still figuring it out too.
We're always figuring it out.
Right. I know.
It's like the loaded question that there's not a real answer to.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like I look at a personal brand. I mean, again, and in this day, like we're all online. We all kind of like present ourselves in a certain way. And to me, I think we've seen the power of like showing up online and how you can grow and create an audience and then a community from that. And so to me, I think I've personally learned a lot over the last few years and have gone through some things that I feel like would really help other people. And of course, you know, there's the community aspect, and then there's the writing, storytelling aspect. I love to write. I've been a writer since I was like a child, since I could pick up a pencil or a pen. And I'm really starting to like actually embrace that. Before I was just like, oh, I like to do that. Like I'm good at it. But now I'm realizing like, no, I'm actually really good at it. And there's potential here for me to sharpen that skill even further and like share it with the world. And so really kind of trying to hone in on what that looks like what platforms I want to be on as I like put myself out there, as I put like my work out there. But I really want it to be still pieces of me as a person, because I think that's so important. One of the things, I was actually at Brittany Barcelo's Launchpad retreat a few weeks ago, and as we were kind of like masterminding what this personal brand could look like, she was like, well, what do you believe? And I was like, I think vulnerability is like a key pillar for both of these things, because you can't connect with people if you're not vulnerable, and you connect with people through storytelling, but your stories can't be authentic if they're not vulnerable. And so it's this like do kind of thing. And she asked me, well, are you vulnerable? And I was like, ooh, I don't know. And if I don't know, that probably means I'm not being vulnerable,
Right.
As much as I would like to, or as much as I believe I should be. And so I really sat with that question. And I think that's going to be a big pillar of like what I share about, as well as like this vulnerability piece. I mean, the writing and the storytelling I have down, and the community building, obviously, like from a strategic standpoint, I have down, but it's like, how can I be more vulnerable about like the things I'm going through, how I like actually got to this point in my life, things like that. And so I think that's really kind of the direction I'm going in. Again, trying to figure out like, where does that, am I like creating videos on TikTok? Am I like writing on LinkedIn? Maybe a little bit of both, maybe all of the above. But that's really what I'd like to do. I mean, my goal is to build an audience on whatever platform I kind of decide to be on or see the most success with, and like start a newsletter because I love to write, where it can really just be a safe space for everybody to like contribute and share their stories. And we create a community through there too.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, I will tell you, I was just listening to a podcast yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was, I listen to it every single week, and I was super behind. So I'm trying to catch up. So I don't know what week it was, but it was the Ed Milet podcast. And it was, I'm pretty sure it was Matt Higgins is his name. I'm not exactly sure. I could be completely botching that, but Matt was talking about how he wrote a book, and there was one specific, part of it was all about his life and his upbringing and his trials and tribulations and all these things. The one topic he didn't want to bring up was his divorce. Like, he wanted to avoid it. He didn't want to talk about it. There was all these things. And it was like, there was like an edit of that copy of the book or whatever. And he basically omitted that chapter or that section because he just like didn't want to. And he was saying like that was one of the biggest I don't want to say mistakes, but basically it was like he regretted not including it, because what ended up happening was he had talked about it. Somebody else had wanted to kind of discuss it on a platform, and he started talking about it, and he got this really heartfelt message saying, I'm going through a divorce. All these things are happening. My life is falling apart, and I really needed to hear your message today. And it was like his wake up call, like, hello, everything you're about is being vulnerable. You didn't want to step into this. You didn't want to lean into this. And this is where so many people need you and your insight and your story.
Yeah.
So just to your point, I mean, that level of vulnerability and getting vulnerable, I remember, and I'm still learning how to be more authentic online. And I'm trying Facebook, and I'm trying Instagram, and once in a while I'll dabble in TikTok. And it's like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But Spill the Tea was basically built off of the premise of, I just want to have conversations and be myself instead of feeling like I'm copying a curated video, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, now I created this silly video that I'm dancing, but then it's like, what's the point? Like, what am I contributing to the world by doing this? So it's
you're hopping on the trends.
right, trending. So it's like this. It's definitely an adventure to just try things and see what you like and see what works and what doesn't and what feels good.
Yeah. And I love that story too, because it's interesting how he admitted that. And he was like, oh, I wrote this book. And like, he had this direction that he was going in, but then that little thing, like that one conversation where he spoke about the divorce, is what resulted in making an impact in someone's life. And those, I think, are the biggest lessons that we can learn, like us who are really trying to put ourselves out there and share our work with the world and make an impact on the world, is that sometimes you start one way and you mentioned something, right, that you're like, oh, that would never, like, that's not my thing, like I would never build a business around that, or I would never, start sharing about that regularly. And then that ends up being the thing that people need from you most. And it's all stemming from you choosing to be vulnerable and not shy away, or not try to be so like, I'm polished and I'm perfect, which can be really difficult. I'm also a recovering perfectionist. So
I think that's just in our nature. I think like that entrepreneur spirit is that way too. It's like, we want to put out quality, not necessarily quantity.
Right.
To that point though, it's really interesting that you say that the things that we would think are nevers become the things. And I also think it's so important in the journey, and when we're experiencing, like we're all going through things probably right now, right? but it's also like in the thick of it isn't always the best time to share it, because then it's like the level of vulnerability, like you lose protection. So you
Right.
also have to be, it's almost like read the room, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that, like to your point from earlier, we want to make sure that we have the people that have our back in our corner, we have our safety, and we also have enough of our own wherewithal to create.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay, your hair is out of place. Oh my gosh, that completely, I'm in a vulnerable state, so that completely demolishes my whole day. Versus,
Right.
oh, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care
Yes.
what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also this interesting understanding when when you're trying to get used to being on social media and you're going through things, like what to share and what not to share. Do you have any thoughts on that, or like tips or tricks or anything that you've experienced that you want to share about it?
Yeah. And I think that's a great point too. I would say anytime I ever have, I'm like an untraditional marketer because I know that there are hacks and strategies and things like that. But what I find is that people really try to force themselves to be on like the new hot platforms, or try to force themselves to follow like what someone else is telling them to do. And it just doesn't work. Um, it might work temporarily, but eventually you burn out or your audience catches on. I mean, people are really smart. So, I think for me, it's the person who maybe is showing up in one way, but they don't feel like it's truly themselves. I I like to keep a running log of like things that happen in my life. And actually, this is kind of my storytelling process too. I literally keep a list of like things that happen throughout the day, whether they're big, whether they're small, where it made me feel something, or it made me feel a connection to something that I've experienced. And then that's what I choose to go write about or talk about. Um, and I think that honestly is the best way to do it, because if you feel nervous about sharing something, I think I actually had a conversation with Christine at Sasha's, her house launch party.
Yeah.
But Christine was like, I was so nervous to share this part of me. And I actually just ended up doing it because it was more of like a fear versus intuition thing, right?
Right.
Whereas like, if it's a full body no, if you're like, I don't know, this might hurt someone, I need to sit with this a little bit more. I have worked with several clients who were sharing parts of their personal story where it just took time, and
Yeah.
they just gave themselves that space to say, you know what, not now, but later. And they
Mhm.
don't have to know when later is. But I think, if you can start to like just those things that like give you a little spark, taking notes of those, and then talking and prioritizing those first, the big things in your life, like you said, sometimes like you have to be able to process these things happening in your life. I mean, of course, there's moments where, for me, I always am like, I should have shared more about like my health journey when I was in it. But then I was like, I actually needed to process that myself. I couldn't really speak on it or give more. I had to really prioritize my healing and my processing before I could go and like be outward about that. So I think knowing that about yourself too, where like you still have some processing that you need to do, and giving yourself that space to do that before you're like, I need to share this right now on social.
Yeah.
I feel like our intuition, as cheesy as it sounds, guides us in the right way. We know if it's a full body no and we shouldn't be sharing it quite yet.
Right.
And we know if it's a yes, but it scares me a little bit, but I'm going to do it kind of thing.
But yeah, and I think it's good to take time to be more mindful of whatever emotion you're feeling. Like unpack it a little bit, understand, is this fear? Is this emotion like directly related? I mean, there's times where I can get online and I can talk about like the passing of, like my mom passed away, right? And I can talk about it like right now. I feel like I can speak about it, no problem. But there's times where I've gotten online and it's literally, I start crying and I
Yeah.
can't stop it. I can't help it. It's just
Right.
like, here it comes.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time because I didn't want to be vulnerable about that. I wanted to be strong, but it was because I was still proving something to myself. Like,
Yes.
oh, I need to be strong, and this is what I need, and this is what I need to like show. And like, it's like again, almost even limited beliefs in some aspects of how I needed to carry or hold these emotions or not.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the processing is huge, and processing is different for everyone.
Right. Everyone has their own way of doing it. And it takes, I think, time is the greatest healer. Another cliche, but like it's true. Like you have to give yourself sometimes that time, and it could take months, it could take years. I mean, there's some things, going back to that Launchpad retreat, when I shared a story about something that happened to me in college, and it was really funny, and I was vulnerable in a way. But that was something that happened to me 10 years ago that I didn't process until now. And so sometimes like those kinds of things take actual decades to process and understand. And a lot of it comes with, of course, like self-growth and development, and giving yourself the time, right? Like you kind of have to give yourself the time. I know, speaking from experience, like these things that I never processed because I didn't want to look them in the eye because they were really painful. And how can you process, how can you talk about something like that if you're not even allowing yourself to heal from it, or to at least look it in its face? So I think that's another part of it too.
It's huge. That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And it's true, the decades. Sometimes we don't even know that there's something there for decades.
Right. Exactly. You look back and you're like, wait.
We didn't even know there was something to process until all of a sudden it pops back up, especially like, through different modalities, like breath work or hypnosis or talk therapy, all the things, right?
Yeah.
So on that note, let's just touch on, okay, first of all, I'm reading this book about, it's so good. Okay. So I'm reading this book and it's about reincarnation.
Yeah. What book?
And it has, I don't know. I don't even
know.
Okay,
that's okay. I'm not gonna put you on the spot.
It's a guy that it's like he's a therapist and he's done all this studying at
Journey of Souls.
Oh, I don't think it's Journey of Souls. I don't know.
It's a great one too.
White, I think, with red writing. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll send it to you later. But he's a therapist and he starts, this woman was referred to him. And like, no, you have to see this person. Anyway, she comes in and she's got all of the like night terrors, anxiety, fears, all these things that she's trying to work through. And she like literally sleeping in her closet, like all these things are happening. And as an adult, and long story short, he starts going through hypnosis therapy with her.
Yeah.
And through therapy, he starts like extracting different, like she taps into other lifetimes and other realms, basically. Like it's literally other lifetimes. And it's like, then all of a sudden he starts getting messages from the masters. And I'm not done with the book yet, but it has to do with hypnosis. So I really want to talk with you about it.
Yeah.
Because I know that you've dipped your toe in or dived in, I'm not really sure, into the hypnosis world. But obviously there's so much there and so much that's possible. So can you just talk to, like, first of all, what is hypnosis? And tell me the pros, cons, benefits, all the things. Anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So hypnosis is really a modality that goes into the subconscious mind. And so our subconscious mind makes up about like roughly 90% of our brain. And then our conscious mind is 10%, which is crazy if you think about it. Like it's like, I don't know if you think of like the iceberg, right? Where it's like, then it's all the stuff at the bottom. That is literally your subconscious. And so your subconscious develops between really the ages of 0 and 8. That's like when you take on a majority of your beliefs. I mean, it's obviously continuing to like develop and things like that. And of course, certain things can go in there, but 0 to 8 are the times that people are most malleable. And so that is when most of your beliefs are like set. That is like how you go out into the world. And
that's the programming phase.
That is the programming. That is the conditioning that a lot of us are walking around with. And many of us, because it is subconscious, we don't even think about it. We don't even really we don't question it, right? It's like, that's just how we are. I've had several conversations with people who are like, well, that's just how I am. I'm like, and you've never questioned that? And maybe I have, but I do, because I'm like interested in this work, right? But I'm like, you just walk around and you just are okay with this. But that's really, I think, hypnosis is so helpful, because oftentimes therapies like talk therapy can really just like go through the events, but not like release it on a subconscious level. the other thing is too, is like hypnosis helps with like your brain is constantly forming neural pathways. And so your beliefs become neural pathways the more that you instill them. So like if you have a fear of dogs and you continue to avoid dogs, like your neural pathway is like avoid dogs at all costs, right? It takes a lot to like recorrect that neural pathway. Someone put it really well. It's like if you're going on a hike, you know the path is the one that's like most traveled by like there's no grass, there's no trees. You know, it's like having to then reform a new path. It takes a lot and it can be kind of painful, right? Like you're having to literally like cut through grass, cut through bushes, cut through trees. So it's not always easy, but hypnosis makes it a little bit easier because it is designed for helping to give your brain, your subconscious brain, permission to shift beliefs and to process and let go. And so there are other modalities that help do that too, like EFT tapping. I don't know if you've done that, like really great stuff. There's a new one that I'm really interested in. It's called RRT, rapid resolution therapy. And that is really, really interesting. And you can actually pair it with hypnosis and it's super cool. But
I'd be really interested. That almost sounds, just by the words that they use, that sounds kind of like EMDR.
Yeah. Yes. EMDR is another, some people like it, some people don't. I've done it before, but that's basically like the rapid eye movement. That's like helps. How it was explained to me is like zebras in the wild, they're drinking at the watering hole, lion attacks them, right? But like they run away, they make it okay, like make it out okay. They process that, they go right back to the watering hole the next day. Human beings, not so much. You would literally live your life in fear, right? Like if these things happen and then all of a sudden like you're stuck in that, and EMDR helps to activate both sides of the brain to kind of help move that. But yeah, so hypnosis, I have found a lot of benefits with hypnosis because it can reach those like tough to crack beliefs, right? Or even really bring beliefs, sorry, I got a little hair in my eye, to the surface that maybe you weren't quite aware of. That like, I know for a fact when I started like actually working with my own hypnotherapist, I was like, I don't know. And she was like, you know, they know how to ask the right questions, right? To get you thinking, to then bring you into hypnosis, which is basically like, I just say a deeper meditation. I mean, there's a whole like strategy behind it, right? But it really is like, you have full control over your body. It's not like the weird guy with the clock, right? That's like quack like a duck. It's really peaceful, but it's like your subconscious, like processing this. They're using different language patterns to help with the rewiring and things like that. So I think it's such a beneficial modality, especially if you're more resistant to talk therapy, especially if you have trouble with other modalities like EFT and things like that. I mean, now it's becoming, it's been a thing, but it's becoming more of a thing, like clinical hypnosis. Like there are hypnotherapists in like the medical system that like literally work with people to help them like overcome these things. Like if they've had an injury, helping them overcome that, helping overcome smoking, things of that nature. I think in terms of cons, like sometimes it can be expensive, but it's very well worth it. I also think, you know, cons is like with anything, find the right person. I've seen a lot of people out there who are not so honest. I've experienced that myself, and it can be really tricky to figure out because there is really no regulation, right? Like,
yeah.
And who's to say this person's great and this person's not? Like, so I think it's just being able to use your best judgment, being thorough about your research. If you're going to go work with a hypnotherapist or find someone who practices these modalities, make sure that you're like, it feels good to pay that you're not being like scammed into some crazy price or that you feel like they're just trying to get money out of you. Like you really want to work with someone who has your best interest at heart. And if you can find that, it is always well worth it. And of course I have some recommendations I could always share if anyone ever wants to hit me up, I have those.
Yeah,
people.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So with that, what are the, like, do you go into hypnotherapy? I've never had hypnosis.
Okay. Yeah.
So do you go in with kind of like an idea of potential limited beliefs from talk therapy that you already know about that they help to work through, or does it all come through simply through the hypnosis?
That's a great question. And it depends probably on the hypnotherapist. my hypnotherapist, as well as a few others that I've worked with, we kind of start out that's like, what's going on? What have you been kind of coming up against? What's been going really well for you? Just this morning, actually, I had my last hypnotherapy session with my hypnotherapist, Becky. And she was like, what's been going on since we last talked? And I was like, well, this is going on. And, blah, blah, blah. And I am probably a therapist dream because I'll literally talk myself into the problem. I'm like, and that's the problem. Right. But sometimes like, if someone's stuck or maybe they're not so like well-versed in that, like she'll ask me questions like, and like, what about this? And what about this? And so that talk therapy session or part of it is definitely really helpful for identifying those beliefs. I know I've gone in where I'm like, I know this is what I want to work on this week. I've noticed this happening in my life. And then we kind of skip that and go right into it. So it can kind of go both ways. If you're like, I know I struggle with, we'll use like smoking, maybe the talk therapy session looks like, okay, you struggle with smoking, but like, when did you take that belief on? Or like, who made you feel like you had to smoke? Or like, who do you think of when you think of smoking? Like these kind of things, like how do you associate smoking in your mind is really what we're trying to get to, because that's how we're ultimately going to clear it through going into hypnosis. And a lot of the time people observe it from a young age, or it was, kind of pushed onto them at a young age. And so honestly, I feel like a lot of these modalities are a lot of like inner child work, healing that subconscious from the ages of like 0 to 8.
Oh my goodness. Whew. My other question, you were like, okay, well, when did you first take this on, or when do you remember? What about the situations that it's like, well, I really don't know. I don't remember. I have no idea. Is that something that like they'll ask during hypnosis that like you're more readily available? Like, because it taps into a different part of your brain. Mm-hmm. So is that something that maybe in a talk therapy session, you wouldn't maybe have the answer to, but then once they put you into your hypnosis state, they ask you that question again and it comes up?
Yeah, that's another example too. I was in, so again, using my hypnotherapist, for example, she'll ask me, do you believe that you took this on before, during, or after your birth? So there's that kind of like past life aspect too, because if you believe in that, oftentimes, which I do, so I do believe that we come into this life, if we're reincarnating, with these beliefs and fears from another life, or karmic lessons, right? And so she believes in that too. And that's why she asks the like before, during, after. There's of course things that happen like that could be during your birth, or like while you were in the womb, like it's crazy. Like, yeah, but humans are really smart and advanced. And one of the things that she asked me today, she asked me a question while I was deep into it, and I answered her, and she was like, I wanted to ask you because we were so deep in the subconscious, and I knew that your conscious mind wouldn't be like, no, ring the bell, right? Like the conscious mind is always like, wait, no, we're not scared. Oh, no, we're good, right? It's the ego. It's all. So there's definitely ways to like get to the answer. And sometimes the answer like really isn't that important other than to like give color to the situation. So the hypnotherapist can like tailor the hypnosis to you as much as possible. But hopefully that answered your question a little bit too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's so remarkable because the woman in the book that I'm reading that is experiencing the hypnosis, there's only certain parts so far that he's actually revealed like, hey, this is this, because obviously as your therapist, they need to make sure that you're mentally stable enough to take on the information that they're about to lay out for you. Yes. Like, hey, this is what you said, or this is the recording or whatever. But one of the things that I think is so interesting is her religious beliefs did not align with reincarnation. So I'm really interested to see how that all evolves through the book. And obviously it's based off of a true story. So it'll be really, really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. Sorry, Kat was Kat's trying to like catch a bug on my desk.
Oh my gosh, the moths.
Moths. That's exactly what I think. It's like, is it inside? Oh my gosh, it's literally inside of the window right now. So anyways, that's a great way. But yes, anyways, it's really interesting, especially like, like I said, I thankfully believe in it. She believes in that. But I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who maybe don't. And that's where like, I think for any modality, you have to be open-minded, and understand, like, again, also find a therapist that like aligns with your beliefs too, as much as possible, as much as you can.
Yeah. But I mean, I just am so interested to see how it evolves, because I do wonder, in these different modalities and through these different therapies, how much do, like, we say never, right? Because so many things change and they evolve, and we learn new things, and we start understanding new things. So it totally shifts.
Yeah.
So I think like the open-minded aspect is huge, but also if you've been conditioned from 0 to 8 to believe one thing, and then all of a sudden you're in a hypnosis session and all this stuff comes up, it's interesting, because it's like our brain will our conscious brain will still find ways to try to dismiss it, right? If you truly don't believe it, but it's also kind of like undeniable. It's just wild to me. It's so wild.
The brain
opens a can of worms.
The brain is so fascinating. There's so much that like we could get into, and like I'm so fascinated too by like when you do deep subconscious work, like how it releases in your dreams too, which is really interesting. So there's so much like to uncover there. I just encourage everyone to like be really open about it, especially if you are healing and interested in healing or addressing certain problems. Like just try it, like I think that's the best thing any of us can do, is just be open-minded and accept and be willing to see something differently. And if we don't agree with it, fine, but at least we tried it.
Yeah.
But it can really open you up to so many other possibilities.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I think oh my gosh, my computer, I keep going to the corner and I have it set up to where it like shuts the screen off, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I was trying to check the time, but yeah, we're almost at an hour, so I'm going to wrap things up. But thank you so much for joining today and talking so transparently and just openly about all of these things. Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'll absolutely be following your adventures, but I'll talk to you offline, of course, as well. But make sure, if you are not already following Adaire, that you do, and maybe she'll post more.
I know, right? Hold me accountable. I appreciate you having me as a guest. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This has been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
I love your energy. I love just your openness, and you're so down to earth. And I just appreciate you jumping on here and joining me today.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. You're brilliant.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.